Hi and welcome everybody to SUSE QE Tools workshop at the beginning of June in 2026. The topic for today will be the usual roadmap presentation. Sorry, need look up. So last time while I was on vacation, there was a call about migrating to Leap 16.0 and Network Manager experience from that. Unfortunately, there was no recording, but I was told it was a good success. So if you also haven't attended, then this would be a miss. But for now, roadmap presentation. The last we did 2 months ago, so we can have the usual coverage period of 2 months. And what I will do for that, I will look into the link of the last closed, adjust this period to 60 days. So to get an overview, oops, sorry, no, this I don't want this grouped by this, but by project. Right, that makes more sense. So we have nearly 200 tickets in that. Let's see, we will start with the OpenKey infrastructure. We will go open OpenKey project, then the generic tickets, and then let's see if there's anything noteworthy from SUSE internal work. As usual, we have some reactive work. I would say roughly 50% of our work is reactive, responding to what's happening in our infrastructure, user reports about crashes, maybe regressions, or problems that just happen when maintaining an infrastructure, a network, and such. So that should be usually expected, but considering that we try to follow a DevOps approach, I would say that's still the same balance. So again, half of our work is reactive, and the other half is actually what should be considered pre-planned. Okay, let's see if there's something specific. So I mentioned the story of migrating to Leap 16.0 for our production environment, as well as migrating from Wicked, which is now unsupported on Leap 16.0, to Network Manager. There are also some other minor features which are not anymore supported after this major OS upgrade, which we need to consider. For example, 32-bit packages. We still had some 32-bit packages installed on some hosts, which led to problems. What we did there, what I did, is remove those packages, make sure that we don't have any dependencies there, ensure that the automatic upgrade still works, and make that work again so that we have a nightly schedule of automatic updates. So yeah, we see multiple mentions of Network Manager and Wicked, or the version of Leap here. There are also some other things which we did in the infrastructure, which I want to mention. For example, tuning the Postgres database and certain parameters which are able to control how one can work with the database. So what I did there is look at parameters, for example, those work mem, shared buffers, more threads, more worker processes, and such, giving more memory reserved for the database, and certain workers for background work, maintenance work, and all that. And then look at the effect in monitoring. And what we can see here is looking at the number of OpenQA jobs that the OpenQA instance, in that case OpenQA SUSE is processing, laid over with the system load of the corresponding time period. And what we can see is that, like, more or less the first half of the view is before tweaking, and the second half, after starting with the 20th of April, if I remember correctly, is after fine-tuning. We can see that the system load has decreased, but at the same time, when before we had most of the time we were limited at this line, which was 270 jobs. we can now have dynamic scaling of the job limit, which can go higher. So we can see that we go to much higher values. I allowed OSD to scale up to something like up to 700 jobs. That was actually a bit too much, leading to outages. For example, you can see a little gap of data in there, which is when the system says like, okay, there's enough free resources, scaling up really high, but then the system became unresponsive because there was no buffer when a surge of workers were coming in trying to upload jobs. So, it's still a bit of tweaking that is left open. What else from the infrastructure? Let's see, leap 16.0, leap 16.0, new size classes. Yeah, you can see here, reconsider global job limit, for example, on O3. Let's see if we also have, okay, I don't have a graph there, but originally we had 170 jobs, and by now that is also running many more jobs. So we actually use that as a minimum. That means at minimum we would be able to work with 170 jobs in parallel, allow the system to scale up to many more, to 500. Good. And then next would be in the OpenQA project. So what we have in there is we have some performance tuning for how we actually handle requests to the web UI itself. So to show the effect, I'm just loading the O3 front page. So what we can see is that there is a loading indicator for some time, but overall the system is really snappy. And before or during some time it showed a warning that there are too many jobs and this is limited on purpose. So, rather get a response and have it tell you that it's limited rather than not getting response at all. Yeah, start. Seba.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe this actually, what you're saying is actually helping me to understand one change which I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So now, or even on Intel architecture, I see when the job is starting,
Yeah.
it actually takes quite some time before the modules are being computed for testing, right? Which
You mean
modules will
like
be used?
in individual job details, like if you're moving from.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it
Yeah.
takes quite some time. Is that change related to what you
Uh,
talk about, or not really?
no, that's not related. One is about the computation of the overall results, and the other is about the individual job results. However, there is a change on uh, just from the past 3 days from Dominik Heidler and Fabian Vogt regarding the showing an update in the live view. So if we open any job, let's see, then it takes a bit of time and this would show up. And as you can see now, it only took a second for those details to show. So there was actually a flaw in the Nginx config for how that is used as a proxy. And also if you click on live log, this shows now. And if I go to details, then I see that showing up. So please check the state as of today, because still yesterday I think there was a problem. And let's say in 2 days you can also check the state on OSD. And if there's still see problems, especially with specific scenarios, like if you see some heavy scenarios which still show a problem, then please bring it up and we can look into that.
Cool. Thanks.
Right. I think we can also show the effect of the limiting. I mean, the limiting is still there, right? By default, let's see here what this is doing. This is showing 10 builds of Tumbleweed. And keep in mind that 10 builds means like thousands of jobs that are actually computed. And when we look up the comments for each, like, is everything labeled? Is it failed? Is it passed? And so on. And if we go further, for example, limiting to 20, I mean, this still is snappy. If we would select something bigger, like 100, then this still works, takes some seconds to compute, and then you can see still the result here. So we had a limit which was at 10,000, and now I bumped that to 25,000. With 25,000, it still works fine. this is the tweaking number, for instance. We can say like if this is actually related to use case, if people say like, yeah, we need to look it up on this page for longer, and that would mean that we would have more than 25,000 jobs, then please bring it up and we can look into bumping that number. But the priority should be then on having the overall interface as staying somewhat responsive and snappy. Okay, so let's see. Automating enforcement of strict and warnings in OpenK test modules in Osado, right? So this was actually can have quite a big impact for many of you who work with the Osado test distribution, because now this is again done properly, that by CI checks, whenever you do changes in the test modules, we check that they are proper strict and warnings enabled in Perl modules, preventing some, really more or less obvious problems, but then are hidden because you don't get the response immediately. And now that again works. Then combine product schedules with single calls to trigger multi-product builds. So we decided we looked into that and decided that is actually not worth it for now. It would be really complicated to do. The idea was the following, that usually OpenGA tests are triggered in multiple API calls. For example, consider one build of SLE composed of multiple architectures and multiple flavors, meaning you would need one API call for each architecture and each flavor. And my idea was that we could combine that into a single call to trigger multi-product builds, which would, of course, not take away the complexity, but somewhat shift it into OpenGA. Still, you would need to track it on the side of the calling side, which one were triggered successfully, which one not, and such. The expected benefit, additional benefit, would have been that we would have like a single identifier to say like, okay, we triggered that and we got one identifier back, which would help us to identify tests afterwards. And our analysis showed that this isn't worth it, and the single identifier that we would use would still actually be what's already in place, something which, if you just follow one build of Tumbleweed, is already composed of combination of multiple parameters. For example, keep in mind that this is multiple distries, versions, and flavors already to show a test overview page. So whenever automatically evaluating that, one would use the same set of parameters. So we said like, okay, it's not worth it to bring in another concept, which would also mean changes on the side of tooling. However, if any one of you thinks like, okay, this still has some merit and you have a good idea on how you would want to use it, how a use case could look like, then I would be interested to hear about that later on. Then we concluded the epic about full reproducibility of OpenGA tests after full traceability, which was already concluded in before, plus also, so this I want to go immediately to the saga, is we concluded the saga about full traceability, paper trail, and test reproducibility. The tricky word is full, because arguably some say like this also in theory can never happen, because there's always something that changes. We cannot have everything under control. I mean, sure, that's true. But the important goal that we wanted to reach is that as much as possible, as much as feasible is possible by using OpenGA in the recording context. What we did as part of this saga is we worked on 44 tickets, which included multiple feature changes. We also included a lot of improvement work so that we're actually able to store many more results for much longer, make efficient use of the storage, and again, pointing back to the performance improvement, make it viable to work with many more results on a web UI so that you can work with new results while also keeping older results for very long. Yeah, so this is kind of the ground base, the necessary requirements so that we can actually store results for long, and then how to retrieve them and how to schedule tests accordingly is also covered in the documentation. So if we look for a word like traceability, then we find the section about traceability and reproducibility of tests. OpenQA allows keeping track of test environment, the version of the test code, and needles, the test configuration, and what specific system was tested. This is mentioning some examples like we know exactly which test distribution was used, which Git hash of that test distribution code, as well as the needles, plus the test objects, as much as they are controlled already by the testing variables when scheduling the tests. There are some open points for certain areas, for example, and this is what we consider as out of scope for us within the QE dev or QE infra teams, because I don't think we can do that, which is in the scope of how let's say the owners of the SLE maintenance process want to make use of that in the future. And one example would be that for SLE maintenance tests, what is commonly done is that the OpenQA tests reference repositories coming from IBS directly, meaning that an update is in this repository. OpenQA tests can add this repository and use it. And of course, what we could do is leverage what OpenQA supports, for example, with the OpenQA trigger from OBS to sync the repository content so that we have a hashable, immutable state of the test objects at that time and keep those assets around as long as we need, configurable per job group and per use case. So this is something which we would be ready to support with whenever there's a demand, but that again depends on the specific use cases, and because there's also this transition going on for Smelt-based legacy workflows versus Git-based workflows, plus quarterly updates in SL Micro and all those different variants that would need to be handled case by case whenever there would be a demand. Right now, I learned that the demand isn't that high anymore. I still think that we have achieved most of the important points and the necessary requirements anyway, so that whenever there is a need, we can follow up individually. Next, a throttle consistently failing in heavy OpenQA test scenarios would be one example of things we did regarding the better prioritization and throttling. And I only want to showcase the most visual parts of that. So if we go to the list of tests on an OpenQA instance, we can see in the list of the scheduled jobs, okay, there are only 3 scheduled jobs, maybe not that interesting, but still there's this little question mark. We can click on it and it tells us about the tests. It says only 2 jobs when there are 3 jobs. Why is that? Well, one was so recent that the scheduler didn't even evaluate them in a tick. If we would refresh the page, might already include it. For example, here it says no free workers for class Chemo Edge 64 Max RME on. In that case, I would assume that those are actually, there is actually no worker right now. So there's one little thing which is currently in the work, which is to also distinguish those cases, to distinguish between there are workers, but they're not free, and there are simply no workers connected which match this class. Let me quickly check if I reschedule now. Yeah, okay, so there are enough free resources, meaning that this PowerPC test was immediately picked up, and the others, of course, stay. What we can also see here is the priority value, and also here there is an explanation on what that means. I know that the text is a little bit small here, sorry, I cannot scale in, but it should be clear what this is about. If I follow the link, then now it's a bit bigger. So what you can see here is that we are adjusting the job priority from a kind of a default value 55 to 9,865. This is huge. Actually, it does make a difference because we have enough free resources on O3. If there would be a worker, still the job would be picked up. But still, it shows an example. If there are not enough free workers at the time, or if we are limited by the global jobs and such, then we can see the effect here, which is, okay, this is first max job time. So the job is considered to run very long. So it would block out shared resources for long. There are a lot of CPUs are requested, so it would block out resources on the according worker, so not so many jobs would be able to run on the same worker. RAM is +0, meaning that this is the default value, it doesn't have an effect. HD size GB a little bit. Then +50, because this is a job in the development job group. Production jobs should be preferred than jobs in development job group. Also, because in our experience, often, unfortunately, jobs in development job groups are abandoned and forgotten. +100, because the job group description matches. And the regex basically says like there's nothing in the job group description. So that means that we wouldn't even know as admins of the instance who to talk to. So this is why we say like, okay, put that job at the end of the queue. If you put yourself like contact details into the job group, then we know who to talk to. And +190 because of 20 consecutive failures in the scenario. So even if that would be picked up, then most of the time it fails, and again is likely a candidate which is kind of abandoned, meaning that, yeah, okay, if you would run it, it would most likely fail, so it's not adding more information. So questions about this? I saw a hand raising before. Questions
But
about, yeah?
you answered to me.
Okay,
Yes. Thank you
right.
very much.
So I think this showcased nicely everything that is possible with the throttling. One more related feature which is currently in the work is that we are also prioritizing jobs which use a Git reference to the test distribution in test settings. This is something which we have already suggested to do since some time, and just in OSD, one example where I know that you already have those settings would be the QE SAP tests, because there, I guess that's still the case, the last time I checked, is that the test reference case there pointing to the Git hash of the test distribution. That helps. That makes it easier to look up the modules. It makes it easier to cache the tests on the workers. It's able to properly reference the test schedules and make it more traceable. So this is the suggested new way how to schedule tests, and this is why we want to prioritize those tests, to give an incentive for people to use that format, meaning that tests that don't have it also receive a slight priority malus. This is currently in development. But again, all of that is configurable per instance. Yep.
Yes. Do you have a Saga or Epic's listing all of the feature? No. So let's say I
Yeah.
like to follow what will be the next one after case there.
Right. There is this epic, and there's one thing which is remaining, which is to gradually reduce the priority value based on job age to prevent starving of jobs. So this is kind of the inverse. Like if your job was really put at the end of the queue, if it stays long in the queue, for whatever reason, might be valid, but still we would reduce the prior value again, so that if there's some kind of misconfiguration or an unfortunate combination of parameters, then still you would eventually put at the front of the queue. Yeah.
Could you please show again the saga or share the ID?
Yeah, of course. So the overarching saga is scale up more robust handling to diverse infrastructure with varying performance, because mostly, and this already shows that mostly the bottlenecks that we run into is not for a generic job, but it's like, okay, you have this special job, it needs that special worker class, needs many cores or anything like that, and this is making it challenges. So this is what the saga is about. I shared the URL here in chat, and the
Yes.
specific epic would be this one. Right, thank you for your interest. Right, then let's see. We managed to, so yeah, I mentioned the full traceability and the full reproducibility. Then within this reporting period, we managed to conclude the epic about improved code coverage. Well, actually, improved means complete now. So what we had already in auth audience for a bit longer, now we have ready for OpenQA, and I'm happy about that, meaning that we have full statement coverage of all dynamic Perl code here. There are some, of course, there can always be some exceptions, like error handling, where we would now, like, if we run into that unexpected condition, we would die. But now it's pretty simple. We are at 100%, and also that is a mandatory requirement for any contribution in pull request. So if you would create a pull request, that target needs to be fulfilled. That helps to prevent some unexpected regressions and also makes the life of reviewers much easier. Plus development, because then it's like, okay, at least when all check marks are green, you know that all code is executed. It still needs reasonable and good tests, but that's making reviewers still much easier. What else? Allow hiding job groups from index page. Right, this was also related to performance. I mean, it's a feature that might be helpful to select, okay, I'm not interested to show a certain maybe background work OpenQA job group on the index page. But if you do that, then this can also help to make the page render quicker. Add why is my test not executed information to the web UI. I visualize that with this little information on the job as well as on the job list to show why a job that is scheduled is currently not being picked up. And trigger custom tests from OpenQA tests on a plus button on an index page. This is also in there for longer. Let me just show you what does it mean. It's not a plus button, okay, fine. It's a create button, but if you click there, then you have example tests and tests from scenario definition. Those entries had been there for long. We kind of streamlined that and finally concluded the according original feature request for that. So if you want to try it out, go to create example test, and then you can see it's like, okay, this is an example test, and you can change all those parameters to point to anything which is already there. For example, we could say click here and use the OpenQA in OpenQA test distribution. Whatever flavor we might have designed in there, we can give that additional settings like pretty serial marker equals 1 and the scenario definition as needed, and then we could trigger that. So after the section about OpenQA, in the range of OpenQA tests, what we can see here is that we also worked a little bit on OpenQA test itself, or something which is related to run more OpenQA instances on all 3 workers. Okay, we can actually, that should be in the OpenQA infrastructure project. I don't need to change that now, but I can tell you that in before we had 240 instances of standard Chemo x86-64 workers in O3, and we went to 378 instances. So given that the web UI can scale up to run more tests in parallel, also we have the workers available that can run that. The experience should be that something like a complete tumbleweed snapshot is built quicker. Of course, there's always the long tail, like, this job depends on another one and maybe they take long. That can still lead to longer waiting time, but at least they should start sooner. If we go to metrics OpenSUSE.org, then we should also see, we would be able to see the effect. I don't want to go back in time too long, but yeah, let's just pick something like this. So the 9th of June, that was like at the start of the day. You can see that during the night, the nightly build of a tumbleweed snapshot is triggering 700 tests, more than 700 tests during the night. And when the usual European morning begins, like let's hope that people are enjoying their sleep, at 5:37 all of the tests were finished, and that means while there are actually a bit more tests than in the past, these can be concluded quicker. I hope that people working with the O3 instance can confirm my hypothesis that this is a more pleasurable experience now. Okay, handle code scanning security alerts, right? So yeah, we are looking a bit more into security issues now, given the experiences from the past months, and all the LLM specialized to find security issues now find more security issues in all the ecosystems that we depend on. So we are carefully trying to track whenever something like that happens, does it impact us? And when it does, what do we need to do? Mitigate, reduce the attack surface, as well as improve the security stance that we have. Of course, there had been, let's say, a lot of SUSE internal work happening. Just one thing I want to show is, let's see, I will need to look up products, look up in a separate space, fitting pull requests, and let's see, where do we find some? Here I have it. So this is just one example of a pull request for the SLFO, which is the SUSE internal development project for products which are already released and in maintenance, as well as in development, different branches now based on the Gitty instance. And this is a pull request which is a maintenance update. And what we can see here is that QM OpenQA, which is the reviewer role on Gitty side, is posting comments pointing to OpenQA test results. So we can see the results, which originally were failed, which showed up here, and then the issues were fixed, and job group with blocking failures at that time. And those, okay, granted, they might be a bit small, hard to read, there's something to tune, but it is a batch for the specific job groups plus contact information. So you can reach out to the according group and ask them to help you, or for generic tool issues, know who to contact in there. Also, this is saying this comment was pasted by QMBot so that people know like where does this come from. And the batches are dynamic, meaning that they update to the current result at time of writing. I was on purpose showing an older pull request so we can see that QM OpenQA review already approved 6 hours ago. So 19 hours ago it posted, there were problems. However, they were handled automatically or manually. 6 hours ago, this was approved, and that means that the PR is now ready for acceptance. And we have the according in product increments request, which happen on the side of IBS. So we can also see on IBS that comments are pointing there with the same kind of information. Unfortunately, not that pretty, because as far as I understood, on OBS, we cannot use dynamic SVG batches rendered. Still, we could consider to come up with a nicer format for those comments. But the important part is that the information is in there. Also, what we are using is better updated links. So we directly point to the according results, including this not group glob, which says like, okay, show me all results for this build, but don't show any devil and test. Anton?
Yeah, maybe it makes sense to raise this with OBS developers who develop web UI.
Yeah, right.
To
We
get,
have a ticket for that. It's not currently in the backlog about finding a nicer format, and it could go both ways. Like ask OBS experts is like what is possible, which format should we use. So I assume something nicer is possible, but we would need to adapt the format from the Markdown format, which works for Gitty, for an OBS specific format. All right, and let's quickly take a look in there. Yeah, okay, migrate wicket to network manager, and some problems. I only want to quickly skim over those, not go into too much detail. Okay, any questions about the tasks that we resolved?
I have a question regarding, not a question, yeah, basically question was probably regarding traceability
Yes.
story. For me, is one of the things which or it's more like about the paper trail. And tell me if maybe it's already available and I'm just not aware about it. So the most valuable use case for me as outcome of this user story would be I have a certain job in OpenQA.
Yes.
And I know that it's that I open a bug with a failure, and I want this job to stay for, I don't know, 1 year.
Yes.
What are the ways for me now to make sure that no cleanup will happen with this job, or I can copy it somewhere else?
You don't need to do anything. That's already done, at least when we are talking about something like maintenance tests. Okay. So, for example, if let's actually pick.
You mean this feature that if the bug is mentioned in the
no. All the tests, all maintenance tests, we keep for 2 years. So let's see. What I'm promising you is correct. So we can see that this list goes on to at least 2 months, okay? If you would find a job, we can find older jobs, but let's go in here. So you can see that this is 2 months when before we started with this Epic and Saga, that was like 10 days or 2 weeks. So it's already longer. If
okay, and one,
in there,
yeah,
we can see that this is a job which still has all the job details.
Can you go to your logs and assets? Yeah.
It doesn't have all the assets anymore.
Okay.
It still references the GM ISO because again, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't receive all the log files, but the settings in JSON, like which test git hash, needles git hash this was running, that is still there. And now I want to see if we can go even further. So yeah, we can see 6 months ago, and it says there are more previous jobs, but the display limited of 500 was exceeded. So this showcase, like this is listing it and showing it quickly, right? But there are more. If you go to this job, then what we see is still all the details are included.
And what about logs? Logs I should persist on somewhere else.
Same. So this is, you know, the same level of details that we have. We cannot keep all the result files. The important part is that we keep the job details. And again, this can all be tweaked in the according job group. So let me show. We originally had keep logs, keep important logs, keep results. You can see that keep logs is the most limited, which is also taking the most time. There's more in advanced cleanup settings, so we can see that keep jobs in the database is configured to be 760. So for 2 years, we keep the jobs. And I wanted to see if I can find an example like that by going even further. So
okay, but so still what I see is that some cleanup is still happening. And how
there must always be some cleanup. Yes.
I'm not saying that it's wrong or whatever, but I'm asking, is there a possibility to like keep the 100% of assets and everything of the job? If I have a particular job and I want to keep it, no cleanup is happening. All logs are there. Everything is there. No possibility to achieve the job somehow. I remember there was.
Yes. So if we are talking about them, there's a bug ref because you want to keep the job as a reference for a bug report.
Yes.
Then there would be a bug ref, right? And that means that job is an important one. And we can consider to bump this number 90 days, which is 3 months. We can consider to bump that one to say, do we have the space? The most limiting factor here is the actual storage space for the instance, because as we can see, performance is really good. That's not the problem anymore, right? The limiting factor is the space. Do we have a space available assigned to that specific instance? That's something like really IT infrastructure specific, right? But that's the limiting factor. And then we can keep it for longer. I just wanted to show the one example here. So this is a job from the same scenario from 1 year ago. The job is still there. What we are now doing is we have already cleaned up the details. Like we don't know the individual steps and all the little tiny pictures and screenshots. However, we still know which module ran and what was the result for each. And we can see at this point, I guess
even vars logs gone.
Yes.
Vars JSON are gone.
Because now we are going back in time. We cannot fix the past where we have already cleaned it up. Right?
Okay.
But for if we are talking in 1 year from now, then likely we would still keep the vars JSON for 1 year old jobs.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I would like to go back to the.
Sorry, Oli. I think someone raised a hand while we were.
Yeah, right. I know. So, any other remaining topics for this, for what we did?
There was just about asking for the documentation. So, like, there's for example, there's the important logs.
Yes.
Where exactly I can see.
So
well, if it is here, okay, fine.
Oh, by the way, I can show one thing is that we also changed the documentation. So what we have now is numbered sections in the documentation. What we have did is previously we had something like 80 chapters, and I introduced numbering, plus I added one top level where the document would be the chapter in the document, and then we have sections and subsections in there. So now we have not 80 chapters, but 12. I think that makes sense. And then in there, we can more easily navigate. look for, and plus by now this documentation is not based on ASCII-Doc anymore, but Markdown. Okay, that's an implementation detail, but then also the document is more easy to process with common tooling nowadays. And also AI likes Markdown better than ASCII-Doc. So there are some mentions about important jobs. One important thing is to auto-mark important jobs. For example, if you create a bug report in Bugzilla, and in Bugzilla you click the link for an OpenGA job, then automatically the OpenGA job will be marked with a bug ref, and that makes the job important automatically. So it works both ways. Either you put a label, you put a bug ref into the job, or the job is referenced and somebody clicks the link. Then we know, then we know the job is important because it is referenced somewhere. And what else is important? Yeah, build can be important, which makes every job as part of the build important. Something like milestone build. And keeping important builds. And right, and this is the section about cleanup. And in cleanup, there it says keep logs for how long logs of non-important jobs are retained and how long jobs of important jobs, and then also for results. So I hope this answers your question from the side of documentation.
Yes, it's fine.
And if you want to take a look into the implementation, then I suggest start with the recording config settings. So we go into etc, OpenGA, and then we have keep, import,
I see.
something like log storage duration, result storage duration, import and log storage duration. And then what we can do is go in there.
So it's like a configuration parameter, and so default is configured by instance. So I mean,
yes,
OSC and O3 can have different values.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Oli, what do you think about import-export feature of the job?
Sorry, say again?
Import-export feature, where I can say, okay, I want to have this job as some archive, and then I get all the assets, everything, and then at some point, okay, I want to revisit this job, and I do doing export into OpenQA back, and it's fully restored with everything.
Yes, there is an archive feature already in the client, so you can do OpenQA CLI archive. And actually, because we keep the job in the database, that means just by copying back all the files into one single directory will restore the results. Yeah. So
and when I'm doing this archive with the client, I will get all logs, all vars JSON, everything, like literally everything, or how it works.
Everything that is referenced for that job. I don't know if it includes assets or not. You would need to check. That reminds me, there is one pull request open, which is add download all zip archive button. So if you like that feature, then maybe you want to review this pull request.
Okay, can you send the URL? 7.
Right. So that should allow to download all, which means all that is listed here, including the assets, because assets can be multiple gigabytes big. That's also why I added okay, I need to update the screenshots. Now I need to check the test results, but I also added like individual download buttons, like download all results, but not all assets and such. So with that, I will not go into the whole detail for the plan. I will just recap quickly on where we are from the top level. So we have resolved the saga about traceability and reproducibility. There are currently 2 sagas in the backlog, not too many, because I would like to use the time a little bit to consolidate on the reactive work, which is also often outside the sagas. There's the support still remaining, and those are 2 sagas which you already know if you followed the previous roadmap discussions. One is the support switch to Kitty for OpenSUSE and SUSE-based products. For example, one thing that is currently being worked on is the better integration of the OpenSUSE part, so that we have QMBot also covering the OpenSUSE maintenance process. Anton, this is what you are working on. And the second saga is about support SUSE Prague Office move while ensuring business continuity. Of course, since longer now we have moved all necessary assets around so that we are using the current and planned to be supported for longer data centers accordingly for their specific use case. Now we are in the consolidation phase where we need to clean up something like, okay, in a hurry, also different members of ITPE created different naming of the networks and different settings and different format, how those files are done, and netbox entry in the infrastructure management are outdated or inconsistent. That would mean to prevent problems in the future, because eventually we need to work with the assets where they are currently. We need to update those. So this is why we need to do some cleanup and consolidation work, but then I hope that we can also resolve that soon. Any questions about the plan from the top level? If not, then let me thank you for attendance, and I can only give a short lookout for what will happen next. Thank you. So we will take a deep dive into traceability and reproducibility, the results of the saga, which I gave some glimpse about and presented some more visual parts, and we can look into much more detail in the saga, which is a session led by Rob.
Oli?
In 2 weeks from now. Yep.
But is it the day where OpenSUSE conference is going?
Good point. Maybe we need to reconsider that.
Because it's 9 p.m. the first or second day.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so actually then we should reconsider, and we will delay that and yeah, probably shift the schedule accordingly. And we will have to, we'll have to check the schedule. Let's see if we will do, probably we will not do a hybrid session from the conference then. Yeah, okay, yep, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, guys, thank you for your attendance then, and see you around next time. Goodbye.